Welcome back to Hot Flash, your weekly hot air mini-sode, the podcast where the tea is boiling and the facts are fuming. I am your host, Joshua Robert, full-time artist, part-time chaos causer, and today I am your favorite angry queer with a motherfucking microphone. So listen, I'm going to be a little bit more serious today, but I have been sitting with this for a minute because I did not want to just jump to creating an episode. Let me marinate on this for a hot second because I'm just going to scream at the top of my lungs. Still want to scream, but something huge, dangerous, crazy just happened, and most of the country is not even talking about it. Full transparency, while I was writing this script, I was like, this sounds so dramatic. This sounds so over the top. Like, am I like really grasping at straws here and trying to, make a mountain out of a molehill? Is that the saying? But the more I thought about it, the answer is no. I was going to say fucking no. The answer is fucking no. It seems very dramatic. And it's kind of like, you watch Fox News and you watch CNN and everything is a little bit twisted to prove the point of whatever your political beliefs and viewpoints are, no matter where you stand, no matter what side you're on. At least I can see that. Even if I'm watching CNN, although I kind of agree with their point of view, sometimes I'm like, a little over the top, people, especially when it comes to Fox News. I mean, we all know that if you are not Republican. Sidetracked here, getting a little bit off track. This might sound dramatic, but it's definitely something we need to be aware of. We know that LGBTQ plus rights are under attack, and in certain ways, it's kind of a silent attack, silent but deadly. And in other ways, it's like very right up in your face, like with the pride flag ban. It's straight up with all these supporters and sponsors pulling out of pride. That's right in your face. But what we're going to talk about today is a little bit more quiet, a little bit more silent, a little bit more under the radar. And if you just read between the lines, it'll make a lot more sense. But I'm going to read between the lines for you so you don't have to. So anywho, President Trump, yes, I said his name, he signed an executive order that is titled Ending Crime and Disorder on America's Streets, which sounds pretty harmless, does it not? I mean, we all want safer streets. I'm always like, can we help the homeless people, please? But let me break this down for you. It is a Trojan horse, in my opinion. Every single dog whistle that you can imagine and any anti-trans policy is hidden within the layers of this executive order. So I'm going to suggest you buckle up because today I'm going to dig into what this executive order actually says, how it is a part, again, in my opinion, a part of a bigger plan from Project 2025, which part of that plan is erasing queer rights. And this is not the time to stay silent. That is not even an option. So let's hit it. Okay, and as I said, sometimes when I'm doing my episodes, I'm like, are you a game show host? Because I'm very excited about everything. And truly, I do get so excited when I sit down to podcast because I'm clearly, if you haven't noticed, passionate about it. This episode, I'm going to try to take it down a notch because I do feel that this is very serious, things we need to know. I've also noticed that anytime I speak about trans rights on social media and create a reel, it is my least viewed piece of content or my least viewed pieces of content. And that is why this is so important because we know there are shadow bans on TikTok, on Instagram, depending on what the topic of conversation is. And that is why it is so important that we share podcasts like this. We share content on social media, that we send it to people we think need to know more about what is going on. And one last thing, the idea for this episode actually came from my mom. She told me about this executive order and she told me that it was on their news in Canada, which they don't often get all of the updates on their news. So then I was like, okay, if this was on the Canadian news, perhaps I should look a little bit deeper into it. And I did dispel some of the rumors and speculation on her behalf, but it also does have a little bit of truth to it. I'm on a tangent. Let's actually get into why we're here. Part 1, the executive order. So That is where we are going to start because that is how this all came to be. It is titled like a Law and Order episode, but with all the compassion of a rusty doorknob. This order gives the federal government increased power to intervene in so-called, quote unquote, crime-ridden cities. It calls for stricter policing, loosened oversight of law enforcement, and more, again, quote unquote, freedom for local officials to act with, again, quote unquote, discretion. And when they say discretion, what they really mean is they want to decide who they protect and who they target. I don't need to say this, but spoiler alert, nobody is protecting trans people except for those of us that are standing up. Here's the thing. The language in this executive order is vague on purpose. That's what makes it dangerous. There are no direct mentions of trans individuals or the LGBTQ plus community, but that is by design because when you don't name people, it makes it easier to erase them. It's like a magic trick, but instead of pulling a rabbit out of a hat, they are pulling rights out of existence. Because if they were to name people, this executive order would only apply to them. But by leaving some things up to interpretation, it could apply to everyone. This order also pressures local governments to defund or penalize programs that they claim are non-essential. And guess what that includes? Housing assistance, queer youth centers, gender-affirming healthcare clinics, trans-inclusive shelters. I could go on. We're already hearing whispers about pride events being denied permits in more conservative cities because they're considered culturally divisive. I cannot make this shit up. So while the executive order does not say the word trans, it's not in there, I feel the message is loud and clear. And obviously, if that's what the news in Canada is saying, that this could potentially affect trans people because they are deemed by some mentally ill, I'm not just pulling this shit out of my ass. God, have some respect, Josh. All right, part 2. Project 2025, the master plan. We've all heard about Project 2025, so let's zoom out because this executive order isn't some one-off glitch in the matrix. It is part of a much larger scheme, which is called Project 2025. And if you have not heard of it, you need to. Project 2025 is essentially the GOP's fan fiction fever dream, a 900-page policy guide created by conservative think tanks, including the Heritage Foundation. It's their blueprint for what they want America to look like if they get full control in 2025. And let me tell you, it's dystopian as hell. One of the main goals? Erase the word gender from federal law. Replace it entirely with biological sex. That means all protections that currently exist for trans people under federal law, like access to healthcare, school sports, bathroom use, anti-discrimination in housing or employment, all gone. Poof. Wiped away. Doesn't matter anymore. There are literal pages in this plan that say we need to reassert traditional family values and remove radical gender ideology from schools, libraries, and even historical records. They're literally talking about rewriting queer history. And let me read you a quote from the document itself. Before I do, I need to take a breath because I'm actually getting really pissed off. Breathe. We're fine. Here's that quote from Project 2025. Federal agencies must stop promoting transgender ideology and restore recognition of biological realities. What the hell does that even mean? Biological realities? I swear, straight conservatives love the word biology like it's a fucking kink. But hold on to your butts because it gets worse. Under Project 2025, federal departments would be reorganized to remove LGBTQ plus advocacy completely. That means the Department of Education would strip gender-inclusive policies. The Department of Health and Human Services would no longer fund gender-affirming care, and agencies like the EEOC, which protects workers from discrimination, would stop investigating trans-related cases. And we've already seen this begin to play out. So now do you see why this executive order isn't just Law and Order cosplay? It's the beginning of a much bigger, scarier transformation for America. Part 3, erasing Stonewall. This is something that still we're not talking about enough, and it makes me sick to my stomach. Project 2025 does not just aim to restrict trans rights, it literally tries to rewrite history. And the target? Stonewall. You know, the literal fucking birthplace of the modern LGBTQ plus rights movement. The rebellion that was led by Black and brown trans women like Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera. Yes, that one. According to internal memos obtained by journalists, one of the goals of the Heritage Foundation's Education Subcommittee is to remove glorified narratives of leftist sexual revolution from textbooks, which includes Stonewall. It's like they're saying, yeah, we don't just want to hurt you now, we want to pretend you were never here. And this would not be the first time that history has been rewritten. Do you know how dangerous that is? If they can erase our past, they can deny our future. They want to scrub queer joy, queer rebellion, queer resilience right off the map. Part 4, the reality for trans Americans right now. Let's talk about what this actually means for trans folks today, because the danger isn't theoretical, it is real, and it's happening right now. Trans people, especially Black and brown trans women, are more than twice as likely to experience homelessness than their cisgender peers. They are disproportionately victims of violence, harassment, unemployment, and incarceration. And instead of trying to solve those problems, our government is basically saying that you are the problem and pointing the finger at the trans community. States like Florida, Texas, and Missouri have already banned gender-affirming care for minors. Some are even trying to extend those bans to adults. Others are criminalizing parents who support their trans kids. And meanwhile, hate crimes against trans people, especially trans women of color, continue to rise every year. And here's something Tennessee's Governor Bill Lee said in 2023. We will not allow the radical left to experiment on our children. To which I say, who is experimenting? Trans kids are not science projects. They're human beings with souls, with dreams, with TikToks, with Instagrams, with favorite colors and best friends, good days, bad days. They deserve joy, not your politics. And now, on the other side, here's a quote from Delaware's State Senator Sarah McBride, the first openly trans state senator in the US. Trans people have always been here. We are not a threat to you. We are a mirror, showing you the freedom you never gave yourself. Whew, chills. And to that I say, think back to 50 years ago when there was no social media, there was no representation of different people on the television, when people could not come out of the closet and it was such a small demographic that was openly gay. We came a long way to where we are now, and that is now just happening with the trans community. People are understanding what it is. Children are feeling different in their bodies, and now they have something to point to. Now they have a name for what being trans is, when previously this was never even talked about. So I'm hoping in 50 years, we're going to be far more open to this, but it's just like everyone just wants to look back. Like, it just blows my mind. Part 5. So what do we do? Okay, deep breath. If you made it this far, thank you, because this is heavy, but that's because it matters. So the question is, what do we do now? First, we vote like hell. Again, if I ever hear of anybody I know that does not vote in this next election, I'm sorry, you're blocked. Local, state, federal, these are not abstract policies. These are real threats to real people's lives. And if you are not registered to vote, fix that today. If your friends are complacent by just not voting, then read them to filth and then take them to the polls with you next time. It's not acceptable to just sit by and watch this shit happen. It's also not acceptable to plug your ears and ignore everything that is going on in the world, in the country, when you're supposed to love somebody who's part of the queer community. Second, we donate where we can. Can you imagine if everyone just gave $5 or $1, even the amount of change that we could make? Organizations like the Transgender Law Center for the girls, I can't even say that. It makes my throat feel weird. And the Marsha P. Johnson Institute are fighting back in courtrooms and community spaces every single day, and they need our support. And lastly, and maybe most importantly, we speak up in our families, in our friend groups, on social media, in the voting booth, at school board meetings, at protests, in love, in rage, in solidarity, because silence right now isn't neutral. It is complicit. All right, so let's make sense of this all. So the reason people are kind of leaning towards the fact that this new executive order is going to affect trans people is because trans people of color are disproportionately more likely to experience homelessness, just like cisgender straight people of color. We know this. These are facts. So if this executive order is going after people on the streets that they deem mentally ill, and they are going to involuntarily incarcerate them in an attempt to, I don't know, help their mental illness, they are essentially saying that if there is a trans person that is homeless, they are mentally ill. And it's kind of like, where does that stop? Are they going to start coming into the neighborhoods in LA, in San Diego, in San Francisco, Toronto? Well, can't go to Toronto. Sorry, that's Canada. New York, all the main cities. And are they going to be like, well, we actually think that now the gays are mentally ill and they're going to what? Incarcerate us? Like, in my mind, that's not that far of a stretch. They already have alligator Alcatraz. ICE is already sweeping people off of the streets and just zipping them away to Lord knows where. It's fucking wild out there. And we're also not even talking about that as much anymore, which is terrifying to me. But that's why people are like, is this executive order going to be targeting people that are trans? I'm leaning towards highly likely. And one of my big questions as of late, when I see people on social media or out in the world that are shit talking the queer community, I say, why do you care? That is my question. Why do you care? And nobody has been able to provide me with a solid, fact-based, smart, educated, well-rounded answer. Nobody. People care because they're a religion and they think that being trans is a sin or being gay is a sin or you're mentally ill. Are trans people physically or emotionally hurting anyone? The answer is no. The people that are so anti-trans are either hardcore Bible thumpers, thump your Bible, honey, just it's not for me, or they've never met a trans person. And let me tell you, I don't know a lot of trans people, but the ones that I do know, when I either first met them or saw them after their transition for the first time, I was like, holy shit, this is you. You are the most authentic human I have ever met. They seem so real. And of course they do. They had to take a giant risk in order to feel whole. And I have the most respect for trans people. I think that they are, out of everyone in the queer community, they go through the biggest struggles, in my opinion. And so they have my respect. They have my backing. I will stand up for you. If anybody starts coming out in these streets and taking trans people away, saying they're mentally ill, I will go apeshit. I'm not going to say what I'm going to do because I'll get I'll get thrown away. I'm not going to resort to violence. Okay, let's be real. But I got your backs. I love my trans community. You are a part of the alphabet rainbow. I'm sick and tired of hearing about all these gays that want to get rid of the T and the LGBTQ. I find it crazy that we can't just stick together and support each other because we are experiencing the same things just a few decades later. So I would rather stand by my trans people, my trans friends, my trans family, rather than segregate them and tell them to fuck off. That's ridiculous. And I'm sweating. I could go on and on and on. I will continue to do more episodes about this, but this is supposed to be a mini-sode. So I will leave you with this. They are not just trying to criminalize trans people. They are trying to convince you that trans people are dangerous. Show me the fucking proof. They're trying to convince you that they are undeserving, that they do not exist, but they do exist. They are here. They have always been here. They matter. And we, all of us, have a duty to protect them. Because if they can erase one group, they can erase us all. So stay fucking loud, stay fucking angry, and stay fucking fabulous. And you know where to find me on the gram. It feels so ridiculous talking about the gram or my website or sending in your personal stories. You know where to find me at _hotairpod or on my website, Hot Air with Joshua Robert. And I love my trans friends. So thank you for listening to this week's Hot Flash mini-sode, and I will see you next Tuesday.